Thank you very much, everybody, for attending today. My name is Mark Sneider. I'm owner president of RSW US. This is the sixth in our series of six thought leader interviews. Today we have Tim Williams joining us. Tim, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
My pleasure as always.
That's great. So Tim Williams is one of the leading voices in transformational business practices for agencies. As a career agency professional and founder of Ignition Consulting Group, Tim works with firms around the world in areas of pricing and business strategy. He's authored two books, served as one of LinkedIn's global influencers, and writes a popular blog, Propulsion, devoted to helping agencies and other professional firms improve the way they create and capture value. And you can find out more information about Ignition Consulting by going to ignitiongroup.com. Tim, once again, thanks so much for taking the time today. I know you are a traveling man oftentimes, and so I appreciate you carving out a little bit of time for the Thought Leader survey report today.
It's always a pleasure, Mark.
Great, great. Why don't we go ahead and just dive right into it? You presented us with three questions that I thought were very interesting, very different than the other questions asked in the survey, and I think you're spot on in terms of the thinking, the way you're challenging agencies to think about how they price and how they communicate value. So I found it very thought-provoking, which was great. In your first question, you talk about scope of value again, which I found kind of an interesting concept. But only 24% of agencies always do this. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by scope of value and how agencies should be thinking about it when they start an engagement with a client?
Sure. Well, one of the reasons for the lowish score might be that I made this term up. I really don't know that anybody knows what I mean when I say scope of value.
Oh, that's all right.
I think it connotes, maybe stands on its own, the idea that when we're given a scope of work, we've got a foundational question that we should ask before we roll up our sleeves and get to work on the 19 things that the client has listed. We need to step back and ask, what is the scope of value? What are we trying to accomplish? What are the expected outcomes? What are the KPIs that are going to be tied to this work? Because if you think about it, unless we know the scope of value, the scope of work might be wrong. Right? They could be giving us the wrong scope of work if we don't really know what we're expected to accomplish. But of equal importance is the idea that and no doubt good agency professionals are in the habit of asking, what are our goals, what are our objectives?
Right.
But I just found that in our fast-paced world and in the on-demand world of today's agency client relationships, this question doesn't get asked as much as it used to. And I advocate this idea that we should formalize it, give it a name, and be in the habit of preceding all of our plans and recommendations and briefs and proposals with a section that literally is labeled scope of value.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
And it describes, I think there are 4 or 5 key areas that you can explore with your client to define scope of value. We pour them into the buckets of business-related outcomes, marketing-related outcomes, customer-related outcomes, channel-related outcomes, and internal outcomes, meaning within brand organization itself.
Okay. Are they often, or do they need to be definable metrics, or can they be a little bit more subjective at times?
Well, of course, it's best if they can be things that can be benchmarked and measured.
Right.
I'm sure most of our agency friends would agree that clients are notoriously bad about being able to articulate outcomes. We ask them the question, what are you trying to accomplish? And they give us the fairly useless answer, sales, right?
Sure,
well, we want
sure.
to sell more. Well, of course you want to sell more. So our job is to drill down and help them understand what predicts sales, what causes sales. That's a really good way to frame that question, by the way, because most client organizations haven't thought deeply enough about it to ask, well, what is it that predicts sales
Yeah.
in your organization? It's pretty thought-provoking, and that would lead you to things like brand awareness, brand preference, intent to purchase,
Sure.
store traffic, website visits, those kinds of things.
What well, we see it in our surveys, and we see it among our clients here at RSW, that more and more marketers are using project work as a sampling mechanism for agencies. Does scope of value sort of play a different role in project work versus sort of a full retain relationship? I mean, should an agency look at it a little bit differently and define metrics differently, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, conceivably, I see your point. A freestanding project may have less grand outcomes in mind. You're not working toward a long-term brand awareness goal, say, but nonetheless, the practice and the habit of asking about scope of value is, I think, applies across the board.
Yeah.
The other important thing it does is it helps frame the value conversation with the client.
Definitely.
So that they step back and think about the value that's being created here rather than just the work that's being done.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I see it definitely having application in the world of project work. Because too often it's defining scope, defining price, and not really fully articulating the value of what they're bringing, which can be helpful to an agency, I would think, too, because that agency is trying to prove out their own value through the execution of that project, with the hopes of obviously getting more work from that client. So
that's all the more reason you should work to demonstrate that you did create value.
Right. Yep. So in your second question, you talk about agencies providing multiple pricing options when they discuss projects or relationships with a client. Curious as to why you feel that's important, what benefits it provides, and do you think it'll help agencies better their chances of winning business if they follow that practice?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the key point right there. This is practiced by consultancies like McKinsey, who reports that it increased, and they're pretty good at what they do, right? You'd expect them to have a good win rate, but they report that they're in the practice of offering options when they price engagements. They believe that it improves their batting average by about 40%.
Oh, wow.
But just to back up the psychology here, I mean, imagine that you go into Starbucks and there's one size of coffee, or an electronics store and there's one television, right? One size of TV. I mean, why does everybody else on the planet offer options, a small, medium, large, extra large, when we in professional services are in the habit of, well, here's your price.
Sure.
We don't do what everyone else does. Software companies especially, right? When's the last time you signed up for a software service? You see the different plans and options. There's normally at least 3, sometimes 4. The reason behind the pricing psychology behind this is that as buyers, we have difficult time ascertaining the value of an offering unless we're able to put it in context.
Sure.
If we can see it in context of, okay, I get this. This is kind of a medium. What does a small look like? What does a large look like? Then it helps us make choices. Instead of a yes or no, we're giving our client a choice of yeses.
Yes.
Different flavors of what we do. And what we found also is that it, and this is maybe the ultimate benefit for agencies, is by outlining the deliverables and the outputs in the form of options. It fundamentally changes the conversation away from how many people are going to work on this, how many hours is it going to take, to what you really should be talking about, which is which of these options is going to help accomplish your objectives the best, which of these options do you like best. And we've had this experience over and over again with agencies on their very first experience of using options. they report, you know what, the client came back and asked questions that had nothing to do with why so many hours, why so much
Sure,
time, why so
sure.
many people,
Yeah,
which are the wrong questions, and instead we're discussing the variations in the outputs
yep.
and the actual work.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Makes a lot of sense. And I know I was trying to think. There's a psychological theory, and the name is slipping my mind, that really talks about choices as it relates to control. And the more you can give people choices, the more they feel that they're in control, which sort of puts them in a better state of mind.
For
And
sure.
and so yeah, I mean it just I think from just a social psychology standpoint makes a heck of a lot of sense, in addition to the things that
Yeah.
you're talking about here. So and I
Well,
I
yeah,
I rarely, sorry to interrupt, I rarely see our clients and all the proposals that I review that they send to me either before or after to give them some feedback on. I rarely see pricing options, and
right. That's right. We're not in the habit, but the rest of the business world is.
yeah,
If
yeah,
you think about the clients we work for, they have options.
yep,
The psychology you're talking about is also reflected in behavioral economics, even in our world. Choice architecture is the
okay,
term they apply to that, right? That you're architecting the choices for your clients, which, as you say, gives them more of a sense of control, but also, as I say, helps put in context the work that we're doing for
yep,
them.
yep. No, that's great. And then, without giving all of your secret sauce away here, can you provide agencies that are listening today any idea of sort of ways in which they can be creative when structuring compensation programs for work they're doing with clients? Just maybe an example or two
Sure.
of things they can think about.
Sure. Well, we teach the idea that the hourly rate is really a suboptimal way to charge for your services and capture value. That really is an outmoded and increasingly ineffective, unprofitable way to charge for what you do. So instead of when replying to a client who asks you for your rate card or your schedule of hourly rates, what we prefer is to say, well, actually, we don't believe in that methodology of charging for our services, so we don't have a rate card. But what we do have is a pricing stack. So the equivalent of a software stack, a marketing technology stack, we call it a pricing stack, and it's an array of different ways we work with our clients based on using modern pricing methodologies.
Okay.
So this would have to do with, and there are lots of examples if we had a half hour, uh, royalties, revenue sharing, licensing,
Okay.
subscriptions, dynamic pricing, meaning charging based on real-time results, uh, but even just the idea of fixed price options is a form of pricing that is quite simple, that is better and more effective than adding up our hours and providing the so-called estimate. I
Yeah.
mean, there's a
Yeah.
whole, that's one of the words that we feel lot should be banished from the agency lexicon, is the word estimate. I mean, that's what repair shops do and general contractors. We're knowledge workers. We're
Yep.
professional services.
Right.
We don't do
Right.
estimates.
Right. Right.
We provide a fixed price for a fixed scope of work.
Yep. Okay. That's great. Um, So one last question. If your agency is in a pretty decent position financially where it feels it can choose whether or not a client is best for them, just generally, how important is it that the principles of value-based pricing and giving the marketers choices be part of that conversation? Is that you feel that regardless that's something that they need to be considering, or if there are certainly agencies out there that are in solid shape and can kind of pick and choose who they want to work with. Do you feel that's still an important component to the conversation with a prospective client?
Uh, well, absolutely. I would even challenge the premise, because I think that it's not necessarily a matter of, well, we're in solid financial shape, so we can afford to do something unconventional with our pricing. I believe that being unconventional with your pricing is actually a competitive advantage, that it improves your odds. It doesn't hurt them.
Mm-hmm.
It helps you stand out in that situation.
Right.
And in our experience, and we've seen it over and over again, it begs the question, well, wait a minute, what do you mean you don't charge by the hour? Tell me more,
Right.
right? Versus the one you're one of 8 other agencies that all are approaching it from the exact same standpoint, and
Yeah.
you're in there negotiating the exact same thing as everyone else. So it improves your odds, not hurts them, to come back with a unconventional approach to compensation.
Okay, that's cool. That's great. You provided one piece of advice for agencies that, a lot about pricing and creativity and pricing and choices. Any other counsel you'd like to leave agencies watching today, with to help them as they move forward?
Well, maybe just this bit of perspective. If you think about all the hours and late nights and pizza and Chinese takeout that goes into preparing a pitch and rehearsing the presentation and getting the work right, how much of that time and effort and energy and creativity do we invest in thinking about how we could get paid or about how we want to structure compensation? Typically 0%.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
It's, well, wait a minute, have we talked to finance, have we have we estimated our hours? Imagine if we took 1% of all the pitch effort and invested it in thinking about how could we stand out, even in terms of how we propose to price our services.
Yeah.
It's absolutely worth the return on investment.
Yeah, yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, it sounds like it's it's proven itself out in the market, and just conceptually, it all seems to hold together, really, really well. So appreciate the perspective. Again, some great thoughtful questions, and different than what we often see in a thought leader survey, and but equally, if not more important, in terms of helping clients win business. So really appreciate the time today, Tim. So once again, Tim Williams is one of the leading voices in transformational business practices for agencies. As a career agency professional and founder of Ignition Consulting Group, Tim works with firms around the world in areas of pricing and business strategy. He's authored 2 books, serves as one of LinkedIn's global influencers, and writes a popular blog Propulsion, devoted to helping agencies and other professional firms improve the way they create and capture value. And you can learn a little bit more about the Ignition Consulting Group by going to ignitiongroup.com. So once again, Tim Williams, thanks so much for the time today. I know you're a busy man, so appreciate you carving out 15 minutes or so of your day to provide your perspective. So thanks so much.
I enjoyed it. Thanks, Mark.
All right.